It's interesting, Hannah, in terms of what Caroline just touched on, in terms of a sense of place. And it's interesting that the first collage alone was done in America and was about that, your first kind of experience in Britain. And then the third collage being in Germany and about that parting, which kind of bridges the gap between Britain and Germany. It's just interesting where you create the art, but then what stories are attached to the art. And I don't know if you want to talk about that and about your personal memory and being in these different countries, and through your art you're connecting these memories of place as well.
Yeah, you know, I can go kind of two ways with that, because I do feel place is very important. And I'm also thinking that people that you meet in those places years later are also important. You know, I think the journeys that I've done with George, my husband, have been very significant in the healing of memories, and actually to go to places where bad things happened. And I wonder which way to go with that. You know, the place I'm thinking of right now, is the journey we made to Brodnica in Poland, which in my father's day was called Strasbourg. And you know, Poland is a country that's had so many different occupations and rulers, and but in my father's day it was it was Prussia. And he traveled all the way from there to this little town in the Eifel, which was as far west as he could go and still be in Prussia. But we went there to try and find out something of his roots, and it was very, very difficult, because everything had been destroyed. And you know, under the communists, the synagogue and everything, it was, the site of the synagogue was a parking place, but we did find kind of the area that we think was the Jewish area. And one of the things that really strikes me now as we're talking is the significance of the people we met. Because, you know, I went to that place to try and connect with my father, because that was his birthplace and it was his early years. And, you know, I had very little from him except those few memories. And I actually didn't have any documents about him, but we went there. And what was very redemptive for me was, in our search for his papers, we were very constricted in our ability to communicate, because very few people seemed to speak English, and we did not. They didn't speak German, and German wasn't really a very good language to try and connect people with. And they spoke Polish. But with our limited capacity, we actually met a lady who was in charge of the archives. And she and her assistant spent hours looking for my father's details. And her husband had died as a result of Chernobyl. You know, he'd had cancer. And she actually had cancer. So she had known a lot of suffering. And somehow she had this huge compassion for what had happened to the Jewish people in her town. And so she actually found my father's birth certificate and his parents' marriage certificate. And so, you see, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but you see, to go back to the place of my father's birth, but then to meet this person who was uniquely equipped somehow to be helpful. Because according to the rules, you had to look through the books yourself. They weren't really, that wasn't their job to do that research. But she took books home and did it at home. And then she came up with this stuff.
Wow. Sorry, yeah, no, I'm just thinking now and pausing.
Yeah.
It's just like people are just, yeah, amazing, aren't they?
Yes.
I want to find out.
It is kind of the right place at the right time that you're meeting all these people. It's so we have spoken, Caroline, a couple of times, me and Hannah, about connections and serendipitous moments, and you know, being there, and it just so happens that you are making these connections at different times. That everything happens for a reason. It's really interesting to hear, you know, Hannah's story, that you know, when you're there, you are able to connect with so many people and for so many different reasons, you know. And I think a lot is down to your personality, Hannah, and how you interact with people. It's wonderful to see and to hear all these exchanges. You know, it's really, really special to hear this, and that how you communicate and interact with people, but also the compassion and the willingness other people show as well.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I think you get back what you give out, like you say, isn't it? It's what you're giving out, Hannah.
I think, you know, everybody has a story, isn't it? And you know, I feel when I interpret it, you know, and I look back, I think about that gold thread. And at the time I made that, I had that experience of being alone in my room. I didn't see it. I felt very bereft, alone. But I feel I have a Heavenly Father who's actually taking care of things, you know. And I think meeting that lady, it was very, because it was actually, it wasn't just easy, 1, 2, 3. You know, we went, I mean, this is a whole funny story, because first of all, it was very difficult to find where was Brodnica. And it was difficult to find out that was the name of Strasbourg. You know, all I had to go on was my father's birthplace. You know, it was recorded in the documents from the Red Cross that he was born in Strasbourg. I knew that, but I didn't know where Strasbourg had been. We found an old map and we found out where it was. It was south of Gdansk, but we didn't know what it was called today. And we found out from a Polish tourist agency in Phoenix what the name is today. And I had written to the Polish embassy in Los Angeles asking about it. And they sent me a letter with the letterhead of the Polish embassy and the, you know, fancy arms of Poland. You know, it was all very official. It was in English. And when we went looking in Brodnica, we had to go to the big city of Torun, where all the records were kept. And we went to the records and nobody spoke English. And so we showed them this thing from Los Angeles and they were very impressed, you know. It was in English, but they saw the Polish heading and the coat of arms and everything. So we got right in to somebody who phoned and discovered that my father's records must have been in the archives because he was old and they no longer had it current. It was in the archives. Mm-hmm. So this lady who helped us was in charge of the archives. And they wrote the address. So we went in the street and we kept showing this address to people. And they point us around the corner. It took us forever to find it. And so when we rang the bell and she came, and she spoke a little English, you know, it was like we'd been through this tunnel to get there. So it wasn't easy, but we just kept going, you know.
Absolutely. I wondered, Hannah, if you could speak about art therapy and your thoughts around that. I don't know if that's something, Caroline, you'll definitely know more than me. I just wondered what you think about that.
Well, you know, after I made that collage alone, I tried one or two others, and I had some friends here in Phoenix, and they were very interested. So I actually had one or two occasions when I gathered materials and invited people to make collages. And I'm very, very convinced that it is a means to a step in the healing process, because I think a big problem in the whole thing of healing our wounds is our fear of making them known to others. You know, I don't know if it's we fear rejection or we feel a bit ashamed that we're not kind of normal. We think everybody else is okay, and you know, but whatever. So to actually sit in a group, there is benefits in counseling of sharing stuff, but to do this kind of therapy, I think is far less intimidating and threatening to share. And so I don't think it's the whole answer, but I think it is definitely a significant step in the way of discovering healing.
That's really interesting, like how you also step in and help others heal, you know, after learning yourself from, you know, creating alone, and how you as a survivor are also helping other people as well share their stories. I think that's a really important aspect, especially with your story as well. It's not you just telling your story, it's also you helping others to tell theirs.
Yeah. Because I think if you only tell your story, there's a real danger that you dig down into becoming the victim, you know, and that
you become that story.
Yeah.
Or just that. Well, not But I think interestingly, because like I said, my first degree is in embroidered textiles, like fine art textiles, and naturally a lot of work I mean, I'm not a trained therapist, but I've done a lot of work, pre-Holocaust work, when I was doing just specifically textiles in mental health or hospital or prisons or just schools or women's groups. And it is, I think, because you're doing something physically with your hands, the chatter just comes out naturally, whether it's talking about what you watched on TV, if, you know, or who said what, or and it's open, it's not vicious, anyone can say anything, it's not judgmental. And if you don't want to say anything, you're just occupied with your hands, or whether it's art or collage or whatever you're doing, it's just natural, an oral thing if you're sat together learning visually, not like written on a board or, you know, taking notes. Or and it's the oral tradition, isn't it, of storytelling while doing the knitting or doing and I think it's just because that's distracted, that can happen. And maybe, I don't know, or it just happens because you've released, obviously, whether, you know, it's the physical act of doing something is releasing some good morphines in you, or whether like singing or whatever, or coming together as a group, then the storytelling can happen without it actually being therapy as such. You know, if it's obviously unless it's in a mental health situation where it is all part of it. But I think it's the same. Like, you know, I did a lot of projects where it was called Arts on Prescription, so people could either go gardening or do art or do something practical. So you're not just sat in a room being looked at and talking, you're talking naturally as you would with a friend. And I think that's where the healing happens.
There's
Well,
something
for me,
very soothing, isn't there, about doing something together physically, you know.
I suppose, Hannah, I really want to know your thoughts around, so obviously you've done individual pieces. I suppose there's two things. How do you feel about people responding creatively to your pieces? And then also, how do you feel in terms of your piece being part of this wider story?
I think that's kind of multi-faceted, because I find great satisfaction if something I write or photograph or design evokes something in another person. You know, it's I think there's a deep joy in seeing creativity released, you know. Ask me the question again, because I've lost my train of thought.
It was two questions sneaked into one.
It was, yeah. I suppose, we'll do one at a time. The first one is how do you feel when you see other people responding to your story, whether that be writing about it or tweeting about it or sharing a post? How does that make you feel?
I mean, I am actually very passionate about the story becoming known. So you see, when you, Amy, ask me, you write and you say, would you give me permission to post this picture or write this thing? My heart leaps, because I feel that you have an audience that maybe I don't have, and I really feel this is a story worth telling. And especially today, you know, I'm so troubled about our world and all the hostility, and I see so many hints of what went on in the 30s in Germany. You know, there was the Weimar government, which was very liberal, and it was defeated, and somehow the people accepted this terrible dictatorship. And, you know, sitting here in America, it isn't exactly the same, but I'm so troubled by our world. And even in other countries, people no longer seem to be able to accept one another. You know, we are dividing into tribes. It's a lot of tribalism. And kind of, I read the news about England and I think, wow, you know, this is strange things going on. So I think being very aware of the current situation, I feel the two things. I'm very concerned that the message of the Holocaust and the Kindertransport goes out, because I feel it's like saying, look, this is what happens if you are not relating well. And if there is, you know, there is something within man that there is great evil present. And so I have the desire to tell a different story. So every time you say something, I feel really, really good, because I feel it needs to be said. And you have an audience that's international, and it's also in areas of the educational world that maybe I wouldn't have access to. And so I say yes, you know, and so that's my feeling about things. It's not like this is just belongs to me. I feel you must have a purpose in being told. It doesn't have to be an exercise in self-expression, if you know what I mean.
Oh, you've given me so much to think about there. That was fantastic. But it's so interesting to think about the development of memory as well, and how testimony is being used. And you've just given me so much to think about there, that could be an article in itself, what you've just said. It's absolutely fascinating. I suppose.
Yeah.
Sorry, Caroline.
No, go. No, you go.
Yeah, no, my follow-on question to that then is how then you feel that, for example, your collages are going to be part of Caroline's creative piece that draws inspiration from all these wonderful and beautiful designs for students, from survivors, from second, third generation. How do you feel, you know, that your story is going to be part of a wider story and context? I suppose, how do you feel about your story being part of a collective?
I feel very, very excited about that, because I feel what Caroline is doing is very important. You know, it amazes me that I think for many years it didn't, maybe I was out of the loop, but it didn't seem to me that there was much discussion about the Kindertransport. It was kind of a bit unknown. And I'm totally astonished at the explosion of information about it right in these last years. And so you see, I see what Caroline is doing is a very vital part of making that known, and also in relation to this wider vision about kind of like a warning. And, you know, that's what I really like, that it isn't focused on the one thing. You know, we're also thinking about refugees today. Mm-hmm. And I think art, and this kind of art, gets a hearing where sometimes just words or articles can get passed over. You know, it makes you stop and think, like your exhibitions and this recording of the memories in the objects, I think is something that will stay. It's something that's going to continue speaking.
That's really interesting as well, you know, how stories are conveyed. And I think going forward as well, as we move, you know, it's 3 years away, I think, from the 85th anniversary, and how will stories be told during the 85th and then the 90th and the 100th anniversaries? What will things look like? And I think the whole concept of drawing on art, exhibitions, recordings and objects is so central to that. And I think, yeah, it's wonderful to have academic pieces and stuff, but it's so you can directly connect with anybody of any background with art, with exhibitions, with listening to testimony. I think, yeah, absolutely central.
Yeah, I think you need both.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know if you want to add anything, Caroline.
You know, cave paintings, this need to mark make, or you know, the Egyptians, the storytelling was through symbols as well. It told the story, you know. But I remember, you know, going inside, when you could go inside the pyramid, you know, the pyramids for the first time, and just seeing the things you'd seen in books. And I think it is, does it with writing bring it visually alive, you know, like you say, that's like a shorthand writing. So there was a lot of artists that I look at with students that they almost come to recognize, yeah, the symbolism or the color or the connection. So it's like you say, it's not in either or. It's like combined or layering on top. And for some people, they might just visually see the things, and that's enough for them to get their story from that. But then academically, it can be backed up as well. Or, you know, it's quite interesting that the few kinders that have sent poems as opposed to drawings, but then happy to have that poem, you know, then sort of collaged or with information. So I don't know. I mean, I think hopefully all those things would be what would be a good exhibition or a good way, you know, like your things that you've got outside in, you know, the Germany style of that exhibition. That's how people got their information, didn't they, from the newspapers, magazines, and the propaganda or whatever was put on these places, because it's very public and you walk past it either subconsciously or you stop and read it, so, or you see it, you know. And if you think of a poster, if you've got to stand and read it, it hasn't worked, you know. There needs to be like a visual image as well, but they're not in isolation. I think they naturally come together. And many Holocaust art survivors have written as well, or then written about their work to explain that length of detail or symbolism or what they intended.
I think
Sorry, I've probably gone off on a total tangent again. But
you've made me think of something then, in terms of, you know, we've spoke today about Hannah's messages behind her collages, like, and you, Caroline, every time you've received one, you've been posting about the messages and the story behind that. I can't even deal with my excitement in terms of what that will be like when we get everybody's together. Like, what is the story that's being told here? You know, we have all these individual stories, and what is the collective message? What is going on in these artworks, and what, you know, there is that through all of them. And I think, which is so personal and so moving, is what Hannah is absolutely saying, is that sense of loss, that overwhelming sense of loss, you know, years later as well, you know, and people reflecting on their lives, adults, but also their lives as children as well, and, you know, bringing memories back and looking at them in a different perspective, and then either doing new pieces or coming back to older pieces, and what you incorporate and develop from them, I think is going to be so interesting in terms of how you pull everything together.
But I think, yeah, the sort of few poems that have come in from the kinder are definitely, that's with age and with time, and is it with maybe not as healed as you are, Hannah, with some people, or, you know, I think of Ruth Barnett, who fights very much for Roma Sinti today, and other people, you know, that were not learning lessons, and that'll be her dying breath, I'm sure, will be speaking out. And I don't know, for some people maybe it's not resolving it but writing about it, or, you know, being creative about it, or just speaking out because no one spoke out for her. And it's very, very deep, I think, and I hope if it's touched anyone in you know, like positive ways, even if it's upsetting, or, you know, remembering something like, you know, you've just started talking about the purse and it's the first time you've heard about that sort of thing. So like, what is locked away there, maybe, you know, sort of thing. So I'm hoping it's all positive for people.
It's like a little push,
a nudge.
How is it going to be presented, Caroline? What's the
But in my head, it's the idea of, because they are so very different, the way of bringing it together would be like a saying, sort of a handmade book, so like a book that would concertina out. Originally I didn't know if, say, like was a kinder and then their child or grandchild wrote something or did something as well, there could be dropout pages, but we haven't had that yet. So it's just at the moment either someone's individual one or a student or something else. So I see it being sort of like this idea of a concertina book, so it would almost be like, you know, it could go around a room, or whether they'd be grouping, I don't know. But I think if a child did the picture, it would be on a par with a kinder. I'm not going to put them in any sort of order. I think it'd be quite nice to have them mixed. So the only sort of thing I've been doing, as you see, I've been printing. If it's a kinder person, I've sort of, especially like one man, it was the husband of his late wife, sent me that art painting that she'd done, you know. So I've just sort of done like a luggage label as a symbol, like with kinder, and the name of the person on printed. So there's some sort of look through the kinder ones, but I won't be doing that for non-kinder or non-related people to kinder. So it's just very open yet until I know what we're going to get. And then a fellow educator that is doing a lot now about digital memory and Holocaust, sees this as being like, throughout this period, everything's gone online, commemorations, generally not just Holocaust, but other genocides. We've just seen all week Srebrenica, the end of Rwanda's 100 days is next week. So this idea of, is it just going to be a repository that, if things aren't different next year, then it could be added to digitally again. So I don't know. I think that's what's quite nice. There's no actual thing yet. There will be a physical thing, a book or something, but it could be ongoing maybe to the 85th anniversary, we were thinking. I know you've got to write about it as well, but I'm happy to take people's suggestions on board as well if anyone else has got ideas, because I just feel I'm facilitating it together.
It's like you're gathering everything and it's kind of come out. You'll kind of know when you've got all the
got
stuff.
It, yeah. And it's there, and I'd quite like to do my own text, because I've never made anything specifically Holocaust, because I have that thing that I haven't got an immediate member of family. I feel like I'm not second gen or third gen. It's interesting, I do lots with students and I think that's different, but I just think I'd quite like to do, I think the handkerchief really inspired me. I'd quite like to do some sort of embroidered thing, whether it's everybody's names on it or something, or I don't know yet. So that might come out, something later as well. But I'd quite like to do sort of a textile thing that wouldn't be in the book. It would maybe be a separate thing. So I don't know yet.
We should also tell Hannah about, so we had we had a meeting with the Association for Jewish Refugees, and their a representative who has connections with the AJR, and Bea Lefkowitz, who is a dream. She's just wonderful. So she's like the mastermind behind collecting testimony in mainly in the UK. And I asked Bea if because the archive really only focuses on those who came to Britain, so like kinder like yourselves that moves to America, they haven't really recorded. So I asked Bea if she could get in touch with you, and I don't know if that's something that if you would be willing to connect with her and speak to her about your story, because she's absolutely wonderful. But then the AJR have also asked Caroline to do I'll probably write something about it like I am with the book, but Caroline will be going into their archive and using their testimony as well and doing a creative piece in response to that. But it'd be interesting.
Well, we got to get funding first.
Yeah, we've got to get funding first. But it'd be interesting, Caroline, maybe to do one specifically with Hannah's testimony as well. And I think that would be really interesting just to have like a standalone art piece as well around Hannah's testimony, because I think there's just so much from it, and I'm learning constantly from Hannah. And I think, is there a way to do something which incorporates her collages with her testimony? It would be that speaking now and writing down quotes or going through the book and picking out things. If there's something you could maybe do creatively with that would be really interesting.
What do you think, Hannah? Yeah,
I think it'd be absolutely wonderful, because I think you bring something very unique, and I think to have this kind of multifaceted approach to the story is absolutely great. Now, I don't know if you've read my book, and it is available, but you have to get it from garlandforashes.com, and that takes you to Amazon. But it's available as an audio book from Amazon without problems. Hey, can we send you one? Do you want to send me your email address or your real address? And we'll mail you one.
Yeah.
I haven't got a cover for the German book yet, so
it could be that then. Yeah.
What I'm thinking, like, how special would that be? Hannah's story, which will really feature in the book, and your creative response as a as a front cover, but also then a piece that we can use on, like, if we do have a book tour, you know, what a gorgeous standalone piece to show your work, Hannah's story, and our connection, and, you know, bringing these stories together and showing them in different ways. But I just had that thought. I was like, oh, how special would that look? And with especially Hannah's story, because I can't even deal with how much I learn from you on a daily basis. You know, the conversations are totally invaluable. They mean so much to me, and I can't express how much you mean to me as well, and how the impact you've had on me. And I think, you know, and Caroline as well, with working with you recently, it's been wonderful. And I think if that would be a special way to combine everything, I think, and meaningful. I don't want like an image on the cover that doesn't, that I don't have a connection with. I think what a special way to present a story, and like have a cover that means something as well.
There's something special going on, because it's like you draw stuff out. I feel like you draw stuff out of me, and this interchange, you know. I think for me the most satisfying experience is to be with people, and that we're kind of stimulating each other, you know, and creating new things together.
Absolutely.